Thank you all for coming this evening. I'm Dan Byers. I'm Senior Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art at the Williams College Museum of Art. And before we begin our program, I want to thank my colleagues Roz Cruz and Rebecca Dravis for organizing and publicizing the series of artist talks, Devin Nallen for arranging our construction site visits, and Class of 1956 Director Pam Franks for her leadership in this process. I'm very glad to be welcoming Marie Watt to Williams this evening. Marie is one of 3 artists we've invited to submit proposals for a newly commissioned artwork to be installed on the grounds of WICMA's new building. Over 3 weeks, each artist is visiting campus to share their work with our community and learn about our site. Following the artist visits, they will submit proposals in early 2026. The selected artists will return to campus in the spring to meet with community members and work towards the final concept and design, with the commissioned artwork to be installed in the East Meadows, facing towards campus in late 2027. The new commission builds on a long tradition at WICMA and Williams of integrating artwork into campus life. As a primary example, the now iconic, very well-loved Eyes by Louise Bourgeois have welcomed visitors to WICMA since 2001, when it was commissioned for the museum's 75th anniversary. This upcoming commission will create a renewed welcome, signaling the new museum's relationship to its natural surroundings, the campus community, and the museum's collections and exhibitions. So I first came to Marie Watt's work in the early 2000s when I was working as a curatorial assistant at the Fabric Workshop in Philadelphia. It left a big impression on me. I was tasked with gathering images of Marie's work, at that time still on 35mm slides, for the NEA application to fund our Artists in Residence program. Textiles, in this case found blankets, were and continue to be a central material in her practice. And while Watt's work encompasses unexpected and conceptually rich uses of a wide range of materials, including beads, tin jingles, and steel I-beams, materials associated with the artist's Seneca heritage, as well as disciplines like printmaking and neon text sculpture, blankets remain a rich metaphor for her practice. Steeped in culturally specific history, they are social objects, deeply considered in function and aesthetics, pliant and responsive in their material behavior, use, and context. Watt's artwork often anticipates and activates interaction, exchange, and reciprocity. Social participatory projects such as sewing circles live alongside quilted sculpture made from steel I-beams and collaborations with poets and union steelworkers. Her neon text works poetically conjure new, liberated meanings and experiences from languages often fraught relationships to power. Often her work asks us to reconsider our relationship with animals and the natural world that's around us. Marie Watt holds an MFA in painting and printmaking from Yale University. She also has degrees from Willamette University and the Institute of American Indian Arts. She currently serves on the Native Advisory Committee of the Portland Art Museum, where she is also a trustee. Watt has recently staged solo exhibitions at the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh, the Blanton Museum at the University of Texas, Austin, the Johnson Museum at Cornell, the Tacoma Art Museum, and the Peabody Essex and the Denver Art Museum in a 2-person exhibition with Janupa Hanska-Luger. Watt's work is often put in dialogue with a wide range of artists and themes, appearing in 23 group exhibitions in just 2025 alone, from CCS Bard's Indian Theater, Native Performance, Art, and Self-Determination since 1969, to Anonymous Was a Woman, the first 25 years at the Gray Art Gallery at NYU. Watt's work is held in museum collections including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Seattle Art Museum, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Buffalo AKG Museum, Yale University Art Gallery, the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of the American Indian and National Museum of American Art, and the Portland Art Museum. So Marie will speak for about an hour about her practice, and then we'll do a 30-minute Q&A and wrap up the evening at 7:30. So please join me in welcoming Marie Watt.
Thank you, Brian. I just called you Brian, Dan. Sorry. I don't know what happened there. Nerves, even at this age and stage. It's such a pleasure to be here. I want to also acknowledge being in conversation with Dan Byers, Pam Franks, Roz Cruz, Devin Nolan, Aiko, Mariko Siniwar, and Brian Repetto. Those are some of the people I've gotten to meet with just in the last couple days. And we've also been in conversation for, I would say, maybe the last 6 months or so. I also want to point out it is an auspicious day to be here because I have been really thinking a lot about a calendar that's based on this calendar idea of the Haudenosaunee people that is called 13 moons. And today is the food storing moon is upon us. It's really exciting. So it's it apparently is one of the days when the moon is feels most close to us. It's really bright and it feels really big. And it's because of the relationship between our planet to that star. All right, here I go. Oh, I also want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional unceded lands of the Stockbridge-Munsee, and I have a friend who I didn't realize was here, but my friend Monique Tyndall is here from the community, and I just wanted to acknowledge her. And it actually, as I'm acknowledging friends, I promise, as a person who collaborates, I sort of feel like there's a lot of partners and friends in the audience, but I have friends from Light Bright Studio in Kingston, New York here, as well as from Wingate Studio. And so it's really nice and maybe even a little nerve-wracking to be in the room with these people whom I deeply admire and who I've been in relationship with for a while. All right. So I wanted to start by just introducing you to myself. I'm a citizen of the Seneca Nation, and we are one of the 6 tribes that make up the Haudenosaunee, or the people of the Longhouse. I am from the Turtle Clan, and historically our clans marry, historically we have 4 bird clans and 4 animal clans, and you marry the opposite clan, which would create balance. And my husband is non-native, but his moniker as a graphic designer is the Crow. And so I think that I have found balance in my house. I thought I would just share some early work. This was an installation at the Institute of American Indian Arts. And I realized that I have this set up in this specific way that I might have Roz go back. I might have you help me take my slides backwards because now I can't see the slide that I'm talking about on my screen. Does that make sense? So I don't know if you can help me with that up here or someone perhaps, but then I will continue talking about this piece. Oh, so this
one.
Okay.
And then
Wait.
This is next.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. I am using technology in a slightly different way that was supposed to make me feel more organized, and I actually think it confused me. I apologize. Okay, so the installation that's on the screen right now is this installation from the Institute of American Indian Arts. And I think that it really sort of early on starts to reveal my interest in working with different materials. I think of these materials as conceptual. In the foreground, there is a carved wooden sculpture of blankets, and I am using reclaimed wood in which the rebar is still sort of lodged in that lower left-hand corner, and for me it almost feels like a belly. One of the things I love about wood, and I learned by using it, is that it's this material that breathes, and so this beam was probably, I don't know, worked in a building as a foundational structure, and then 50 or 100 years later, I worked with it using CNC scanning and carving technology, and then going back into it by hand working it. And one of the things that's kind of amazing to me, though, is just how wood breathes, and it does something called checking, which is those cracks. And I think that those are really beautiful parts of that wood, but the other thing that happens is that this wood still gives sap. So like the sap will start to like come out of the wood after, kind of having this new form emerge from it. The other thing that I've been thinking a lot about at this time is I wanted to learn how to use bronze. And so I took a class at PSU back in the day when they had a foundry. And I'm looking at Roz here because she actually went to Portland State University's MFA program. And so this is going to be the heaviest bronze piece that you could imagine. There's no thin walls on it. It's like a weight. And but one of the things I was really interested in is thinking about how bronze is this material used to used for creating monuments. And early on when I started working with blankets, I was getting blankets, anything $5 or less from the thrift store. It was at the advent of polar fleece, and so I think people were just letting all these beautiful wool blankets go, and I was buying them. My criteria for buying a blanket was anything $5 or under, and I wanted it to be wool. And so I wasn't choosing blankets for aesthetic reasons, but I was really interested in how, in my community, we give blankets away to honor people for being witness to important life events. And it's as much of a privilege to give a blanket away as it is to receive one. And I first had this goal of kind of creating a sculpture where I would stack the blankets and they would connect sky and ground. And for me, that reference of those blankets was like I was thinking of linen closets, and I was thinking of Brancusi's endless column, and the conifers of the Pacific Northwest, and totem poles. And I also was thinking of the Seneca and Haudenosaunee creation story, in which Sky Woman peers through this hole in the sky world. And she falls and she clutches this earthen matter. And as she falls, first she's helped by birds, and then she's helped by animals on what we refer to as Turtle Island. And so one of the reasons why we have clan animals is that they actually acknowledge our historic relationship with the animals and how they help Sky Woman. And so for me, that access point is very ladder-like, and it connects these spaces, earth and sky. So back to bronze. I started really thinking about how, as I started working with blankets, people would say, oh, my grandmother had a blanket like that. And they would launch into these stories about blankets. And so I started thinking that it was strange that we have this tradition of bronzing baby shoes, and granted, it's a different process, but it is kind of that bronze effect. But why would there be this tradition when, in fact, this humble object, we're constantly imprinting on them, we're received in them, and we depart this world or life in them. And so they're just this incredible, in a way, this incredible document. The other thing I like to remind people about blankets is that they take on the shapes of their inhabitants, and they're very pelt-like and skin-like, and even though logically it seems like they're square or rectangular, they really are pretty wonky and beautiful, and that's one of the things I love about them. So one of the reasons, as Dan pointed out, one of the reasons why I've been invited here is to discuss how I've experienced and approached public art projects in the past. And I wanted to start with this model that's which was a prototype for an idea that I had for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this piece is called Cradle, Blanket Stories Cradle. And the idea for this piece was that if from a bird's eye view, if you look down on it from the Seattle Space Needle, you would see an X, which marks a spot, which is also actually how Indigenous people used to sign our treaties. And if you were in front of it, though, you might see an O. And together they're sort of like a term of endearment. It took my now 13-year-old daughter to me to explain that an X is a hug and an O is a kiss. So how I approach a public art project. I do a lot of research about the site. And one of the things that was important in the project that I'm going to talk to you about today is this project was at the Tacoma Art Museum, and the museum was expanding to house a collection of Western art that had been donated and gifted to the institution. And so I first started by really thinking and learning a lot about the indigenous community that was at that site. And that community in Tacoma is the Puyallup tribe. And one of the things that I learned about that word, Puyallup, is that the name kind of translates to like people welcoming people. And so I started with some napkin sketches, and this tissue on the left just shows how crude that can look. And then I started thinking a lot about the site. And so the reason why I wanted to show you Cradle is because I started to think about how this was like a way to take this other idea that had never been realized and introduce it to this site where I think it would have like kind of this extraordinary presence. And the museum is on a hill, and so depending where you are on that hill, then you get this sort of bird's eye view of this X. And then I'm going to show, I'm kind of skipping forward to the process rather than showing you the final piece. So I, for this project, proposed inviting the community to contribute blankets. And in the process, we received over 400 blankets and blanket stories. And we simultaneously did a call for blankets that could go to support a local community center. And so that happened simultaneously. One of the things that I think is really interesting, having worked collaboratively and inviting people to bring or contribute a blanket to a project, is oftentimes people are given the option of contributing a proxy blanket, but I find that oftentimes people give the actual blanket. And I think that one of the things that happens is it's maybe a blanket that wouldn't necessarily find itself at the Goodwill, but it's a blanket that has a story that a person wants to share. And so the idea for this sculpture was to present these blankets in bronze. And so in a way, they really become that kind of monument I kind of addressed earlier. So all these tags kind of tell you which blanket belongs to which story. And then each blanket was very carefully documented. And with a graphic designer, I created a website that is linked to the museum. And one of the things we did is I worked with Walla Walla Foundry, and there we added numbers that correspond to each blanket and blanket story. The color of the sculpture is, there's a name for it. It's not basic blue. It's going to come to me. It's this blue that they use for roadside attraction signs. And so that was really intentional, that blue, but I also, for me, that blue was like a connection between water and sky. And so here you can see that raised number that was incorporated into the bronze casting process. So for the one of the things that was kind of amazing about this project was just like, because the participation was so high, there was this opportunity to learn a lot about the community. And one of the prompts for the blanket story tag was like inviting people to share about like what moved them west. And so one of the things that I witnessed is that, you know, there was a lot of people who worked at the Fort Lewis McChord Air Force Base, for example. And there were a lot of stories about pets. because some of our blankets are devoted to our pets. There were also, there is a big immigrant community, not Norwegian, yeah, maybe Norwegian immigrant community also in Tacoma. So all of these things sort of came out with the blankets and blanket stories, which was really kind of lovely. So this is one of my favorite blanket stories, and I'll read it out loud for people who have poor eyesight, like myself. No, I gotta sit next to James over here. Okay. Brenda, my wife, was possibly the worst quilter in the world. However, she made me this small quilt several years ago to remind me of home. I proudly used it on a long series of cots and bunks in Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan on multiple deployments from Fort Lewis as a defense contractor. She loved her home in Tacoma and would be overjoyed to know her quilt has become a piece of Tacoma art. I think one of the things I so love about that story is it's really this dedication to this person who's probably no longer with us. And, but it also tells this beautiful story about the community. So this is Jonathan in the vest there from Walla Walla Foundry. He's now, I believe, the director of the foundry. And he's a veteran, and we installed this on Veterans Day, so he received a blanket. And there's some friends and members of my team. And then this is a picture of the piece installed. And I will say, like, I worked with structural engineers, and these pieces are cantilevered. They look like they touch the wall. It looks like the sculpture might continue into the museum, but it stops about an inch away from the museum. And I worked intimately with the architects and the museum and structural engineers to, on all the intimate pieces, and the education department. Like, it was a real team effort to realize this piece. So I wanted to share a smaller piece that really takes up just one slide or two. This is at Laumeier Sculpture Park. And I think the thing that, I guess, the backstory about this piece is I visited Laumeier and I was taken to the Cahokia Mounds. And I was invited to do a piece there that would be a temporary installation, and it's still there. It's still living there. And one of the things that was so interesting to me about the Cahokia, though, is that at its peak, there were probably 10 to 20,000 people that lived in this community. And to create those mounds, it is estimated that it took probably 15 million baskets of dirt by thousands of people to build those mounds. And so this piece is called Earth Mover, and I worked with a Haudenosaunee basket maker and cast this basket in bronze, and it's upside down mainly so it won't become a trash receptacle. But I wanted to kind of compare these two ideas of sort of earth moving machines. All right, so here's just a little bit more about my work. And I actually really think that my process in all my projects sort of is very reflective of how I would, how I do go about solving problems and how I would approach an outdoor sculpture project. This is an image from a sewing circle at the Denver Art Museum. And what is special about this particular image to me is that while I was an artist in resident at the Denver Art Museum, I met these young women this open to the community sewing circle. And they started telling me stories about how one of them was a jingle dress dancer and one of them was a fancy shawl dancer. And I knew I was going to be coming back to the museum and doing an outdoor sewing circle that was simultaneous to the Denver Art Museum's annual powwow. So I thought, I'm going to create this piece that I'm so inspired by their stories. I'm going to create a piece that that I can share with them. I did not run into them again, but I will say, like, it's like an experience that really sort of transformed my practice and kind of changed the way I approach my work in a lot of different ways. So the piece on the left is called Butterfly, and we're kind of working on it at a table. And in the early days of my sewing circles, it was just one piece, and everybody's around a single table, and people can come and go as they wish, and I try to feed people, and nobody needs any sewing experience. And so one of the things I realize is just when your eyes are diverted and you're working with something as familiar as cloth, stories flow. The piece that was recognized is called Butterfly. And one of the things that happened in the process of working with this new material, the tin jingle, is that I realized that the work needed to come away from the wall for the jingle to have a sense that it could make a sound. And that was sort of the beginning of all the work sort of coming away from the wall. So this is an installation at Site Santa Fe. So I think in that moment, I don't know, like, so this is like fast forward to like almost present day. I think one of the things that I realized in working with those jingles is that there was this tendency for people wanting to touch the sculpture. And, you know, the best security report I ever got from the Seattle Art Museum was that like a 6 or 7 year old like went up to hug the sculpture, right? It's like, that is like a good problem to have. So I think it's always been in my nature to want to have that kind of tactile, kinesthetic experience with pieces. And I think I knew early on that this is something that would happen, but you know, it's probably like easily a decade later that I've started working with these tin jingles, making sculptures in which people are invited to touch them. They're invited to connect with them and have a sonic experience and a community experience. So one thing that's important to know about the jingles is that the jingle dress dance came about it's considered a healing dance, and it came about during a pandemic, but the pandemic was influenza, and it was 1917. And in an Anishinaabe community, there was a very sick girl. And her father, some people say it was her grandfather, was a medicine person. And they had a dream in which they were instructed to add these tin jingles to a dress. And this dress would be danced around this young person, this sick person. And it would be the sound that would help them heal. And we believe the medicine worked because that dance then was shared with other indigenous communities. And so while the dance began with the Anishinaabe, it has been shared with other tribes. And so in this particular installation in Chicago, I'd created a curtain of jingles that you could you would pass through, and that was a way of kind of inviting people to have that kind of tactile experience. And now I realize I don't know if oh good. Okay, I don't know if you're gonna be able to hear this. Can you kind of hear it? I can always do this. So that was my friend, and we were really introduced through this collaboration, but that was my friend, Akazia Red Elk, and she is from the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Cayuse. And she is a 10-time world champion jingle dress dancer, and she also is a Doris Duke artist fellow, and I'm getting shivers. Like, she's just like so amazing, so amazing. And hopefully at some point you can all meet her, because I love sharing people I love. So this project actually started working with the Portland Garment Factory. They helped me kind of figure out how to make these sculptures, and so that was the site. I will share that wasn't my studio. All right, so we have about 20 more minutes, and I'm going to stay focused. I started asking this question maybe about a decade ago. What would the world look like if we considered ourselves companion species? And part of that question came from this understanding that I'm related to animals. And I described that as it connects to the Seneca and Haudenosaunee creation story. But I thought, well, what would be the entry point for other people? And I started thinking, well, in Western culture, it might be our pets. And I really started thinking about dogs. And so I like doing research. And I ran into this image of the Capitoline wolf, and I thought, well, this is sort of perfect. Like, this really, like, this is connecting to what I'm thinking about, because this wolf is mothering, but it's not a biological mother. Her body is a shelter for these young demigods, who I actually think look rather plump. She is emaciated. You see those ribs. And not so different from students and educators and parents. This wolf is very tired. Look at those baggy eyes. And I thought, you know, I really think that this, like focusing on dogs as I'm asking this question, what would the world look like if we thought of ourselves as companion species? It made a lot of sense. And then also I had kind of read a little bit of Donna Haraway's Companion Species Manifesto, and I thought, well, what if we take this further? And so I started sort of introducing them to my work. My mom likes to say we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as hard. And whoops. And this is called Companion Species, Here We Are. And again, like, I was thinking of these kind of black forms as being sort of like speech bubbles, but I also liked how they created this X, which is, you know, X marks a spot, a term of endearment, a place of conflict. My research continued, and I saw this painting in person. It's now in the collection of the Tate Museum, but I saw this painting in person at the Portland Art Museum. And I love how it reminds me of a Vermeer. And in this bottom left corner, you know, it's just the light in a Vermeer. You know how little points of light lead your eyes around the composition? And some of them are, well, a lot of them are invented by the painter. They didn't necessarily exist in what was set up. But I saw this tongue, and it totally, like, I was like, well, I have a tongue. That dog has a tongue. This is like evidence of our relatedness. And I think actually, as humans with tongues, or people with tongues, entities with tongues, like, we have a responsibility to speak up for entities and people and things that cannot speak up for themselves. So I made a painting of a tongue, and then it was interpreted in French knots, something I learned in a sewing circle from somebody else. I didn't know how to do a French knot until somebody shared with me in a sewing circle. But one thing I really thought was interesting is how a tongue, and this tongue, is like so petal-like, right? And it has does the same work as a petal. Like, it gives you water, and it feeds you, and it nurtures you. And I'm always about the work in process shots, so that's what a day might look like in my studio. And this is the piece, Companion Species Field. And for me, the field is those army blankets, because army blankets were used to kind of camouflage bodies and integrate them into a landscape. And so I guess anytime I use army blankets, I kind of think of them as being kind of a metaphor for land. And actually, I grew up as a kid, like one of my favorite blankets, my blanket story, is that I remember like us having this breezy station wagon, and there were like the army blankets that came from the surplus store, and we would build tents and forts out of them, and my parents would change tires on them, and we would picnic with them, and when it was really cold and we'd come back down from the mountain after maybe skiing, like we would be covered up in them. They were great. And unfortunately, I don't think we have them anymore, which is very sad. This is a piece that I worked on with Jeff Mack at the Corning Museum of Art when I was a guest artist. And I think the thing that was very special to me about this is that it actually led to the next sculpture, and it was something that I really wanted to do. Sometimes things gestate for a really long time, even though I really want to do it, and I can't tell. I think sometimes I'm not ready to jump off the ledge, or the timing isn't right. But anyway, Jeff I talked with him, and he was like, we were trying to figure out our approach to like what I'd make. And I just like came up with all kinds of different things. I don't really consider myself a glass person, and it was hard for me to even imagine what I'd make out of glass. But I was showing him this drawing, and I was telling him about, what this question, what would the world look like if we were a companion species? And he's like, I can interpret that drawing. And so this is a 2,000-pound red cedar canine that was created in my studio, and it's a little bit like a ship in a bottle. And this is at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art in Western Washington University. Not Western Washington, sorry, at Washington State University. And this, for the art students in the room, and just for people who like to build stuff, here's a time-lapse video of what this looked like. It breaks down into 20 pieces. There's threaded rods that go through it. Actually, in 2 months from now, thankfully, it will like leave my basement storage. I have a fabulous companion. It will leave my basement storage and be at the Seattle Art Museum. But one of the things I really appreciate about it is that you almost smell it before you even enter the space. Like it kind of like tells you something's around the corner. And what I wanted to do in this piece, it's called Companion Species Underbelly, I really wanted to invite people into that vulnerable part of this canine. And that vulnerable part is like vulnerable on me too. So I put this in here specifically for Brian. I don't know if he's in the room, but I put this in here for Brian because he was commenting on this piece that I did with Chanupa Hanska Luger during the pandemic. We invited people to embroider a word that they wanted to share in this moment, or it could be an image. And so probably over 500, 1,000 bandanas came from all over the world and became the cloak for this canine that actually is sort of, has tent-like elements that sort of collapse, and they can be kind of flat packed aside from the head. And it really isn't an outdoor piece, but we did decide to photograph it outside. And this is at Camp Colton, that is a kind of sister property to Stello, which is a nonprofit arts organization in Portland. So, as I was working and thinking about this this Capeltine wolf and this word mother. And I have to share, I come from a matrilineal society, and I was thinking a lot about this word. And then all of a sudden, like on the radio, or I should say probably streaming, the song What's Going On came on. And it struck me in a way that was different than riding in my parents' station wagon in the 70s. And one of the things that I learned about that song is that it was actually originally written by Obie Benson of the Four Tops. And he worked a long time to get Marvin Gaye to sing it. And I think Marvin, helped the writing along. But it actually came about because Obie Benson was on a bus, and he saw this huge protest at People's Park in Berkeley, California. And from the bus, he was asking himself, what is going on? And I think, like, for me, it hit a chord. There was a lot of things happening in the world at home. Fast forward in time. Oh, actually, before I do that, I just want to remind people what else is happening here. So we're talking 1969. Is that what the slide says? It's there's the assassination of Martin Luther King. There is the American Indian movement, occupation of Alcatraz. There's a civil rights movement. So all of these things are happening. And I guess I couldn't help but associate it with things that were sort of also happening. So Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, the water protectors, and also climate change activism. And so one of the things that is that started happening in my work, and I realized my next slide doesn't really lead to where I thought we were going, but I guess one of the things that it started to happen in my work is I started thinking, in that song, Marvin Gaye is calling out mother, mother, brother, brother, sister, sister, and I started thinking, well, in an indigenous way, the call continues, and it includes grandmother, grandmother, uncle, uncle. It includes water, water, deer, deer, turtle, turtle. So it's really about how we're all connected. And so I think that's how that song spoke to me. But the other thing that happened is I started really thinking a lot about, well, what is twinning language? So when Marvin Gaye, I'm sure this is also a construct of songwriting, but when he says that word twice, it is connecting to a history of call and response. It is also a way of making an urgent message go even further in space. And then in an indigenous way, it's about calling back to our ancestors and calling forward to future generations. So I think that one of the ways I think of urgent messages being conveyed in my work is sort of through this shape that's sort of like a speech bubble. Or in this case, I know it looks a little bit like a pennant, but I also think of it as being this kind of a funnel through which sound can travel. And I started thinking about working with neon probably shortly after, what was it? Maybe after making that beaded stuff. And my gallery, one of my gallery director friends, Jane Beebe, she said, why do you want to work with neon? I don't see the connection. I said, well, Jane, it's a bead and it's a cord. Why wouldn't I work with neon? And so I had another friend tell me that even Marie tape can be a bead. It's yes, there's names for things, but we can change names. I even started thinking, well, maybe neon is a traditional indigenous material. So this is kind of evidence of a project that's kind of ongoing in my practice, and it's the reason why I reached out to Light Bright Neon probably 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and I wanted to do a neon piece that amplified the words Turtle Island. And I wanted it to be this outdoor piece, and I wanted to place it in sites, ideally in New York, where people would be invited to affirm something that was important to me as a Seneca and Haudenosaunee person. And I think by nature of just being outside, like, you wouldn't necessarily have a choice to not say it, because it's this thing that is stitched in this bright orange material. And I like how it's okay if you don't know what it means. And also I like that it puts the viewer in the position to like research what it means. And the words themselves to me are incredibly poetic, or at least like can kind of like tickle your imagination, and you can kind of run with it from there. And so this is this installation. Again, it's like kind of a process piece, and we're at 6:52. I'm going to wrap it all up. But this was an installation in conjunction with Converge 45. And the site is the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation. And one of the things that I really liked about the installation was that downstairs in this building, it's this old laundry building that had like I think maybe a steam furnace. And so there is a creek that you can see and hear, like when you're in the basement of this building. And so I had it mic'd so people could hear that sound in the space where the neon piece existed. And then the other component of this project was that there was a public call for people to share, and this really went out to like Indigenous people, a public call using the internet where people were invited to send in any and all kind of paper ephemera like things that like related to Turtle Island and their stories. And so on the very next slide, so what you see happening right now is all of that kind of paper ephemera going up. For anybody who went to the Indian Theater exhibition at Bard, you might have seen some of the Indian Theater posters go up. This piece, I have to say, was initially planned to be outside, and one of the challenges became finding a site that could have like a temporary outdoor neon sculpture, because anything that we did, there was no way to make like a uniform structurally engineered bracket to hang it from one place to the next place to the next place. And so it just became this like big obstacle. So one of the stories about this piece is that it actually really changed radically by the time it was installed in the building, because there was never supposed to be a paper component. But I think that it's kind of what makes the piece so special, because the community is so like literally embedded in it. My friends from Lightbright are here. Madeline came out and their son is zipping around. Okay. Just a few more minutes for the finishing touches here. I realize I might have given you the 3-minute video instead of the 1-minute video. I know. Madeline's working very hard on this. All right. And so from a distance, you do see, you know, the sculpture and Madeline's dance routine. All right. So this is what it looks like close up. And I think one of the things that's really great about it is, like, you know, there's a fry bread recipe in there if you look hard enough, amongst other things. So I think I am just going to leave it at that, but I'm going to end with this neon piece that seems very fitting for this particular food storing moon evening. And this work actually, I do have a show up right now. If you go to Manhattan, I have a show up at the Mark Strauss Gallery in Tribeca. And I look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Roz, and this is Tashva. Tashva's going to come over with the microphone. If you could please speak your question into the mic, and I'll call on people. So look for me, and we'll get your questions answered. Maybe.
Yes. Hopefully.
Okay.
Yes. Everybody just wants coffee and cookies.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your talk. That was so wonderful. You mentioned your daughter who's 13?
Yes.
Yeah, and because your work deals so much with ancestral legacy and looking forward, I was, like, different families, but I was really curious to how your practice changed, I think, like maybe before and after you kind of consider motherhood like a pivotal point in your life. Did that change your approach to your practice or your motivations at all?
So I had taught almost for 10 years before I became a mother. I taught at Portland Community College, and I think that the energy that I was able to give my students before becoming a mother and afterwards, that's where things kind of changed for me. And and part of it was I was just, I really love building those sort of relationships with students and seeing how I can support them and how they can be nurtured and grow. And I will say that, like, upon having a kiddo, then it was like, all right, it was like there was a hard stop at 5 instead of the slow kind of lingering stop. So that I think that would be the biggest thing. I mean, the other thing that actually happened is I had been teaching a class called Artist Skills and Practical Issues, and strangely enough, it actually became my, like, in a way, like a little bit of a parachute that allowed me to take the transition away from teaching full time. And so I took a year's leave after, so I went on a sabbatical, and then I had my child, and I did my sabbatical time, and then I took a year's leave of absence to figure out if it was possible to be a full-time working artist. But there was math that went into that, and the math is like what it costs for childcare and sort of making the balance, like figuring out different things. But I think the reason why the class that I taught helped me out is that I was starting to think about, well, what's the income that I'm making as an artist? And honestly, it wasn't much, but like I could see like maybe over 3 years where it was like, first I'm making like $300 and I'm probably like spending like, I don't know, $2,000 for a year on rent or something like that, studio rent, right? But like, and we can talk about this outside, 'cause it's just like getting a little academic, but I'm a super supporter. I really think universities and colleges do a disservice to art students because we don't give students the tools to succeed outside. We give them a lot of skills, but not necessarily the skill that says, as an artist, you are a small business person. And that is like a really different thing than that's actually like the opposite reason why you check the box, I want to be an artist. And funny enough, like actually it is like a huge part of being an artist is that you actually have to understand how to run a business. And I'm still trying to figure it out. But I will say, like, we did the math, and I feel like I was lucky to have a supportive partner. I don't think it was a risk I could have done alone. And I think it was a huge risk because my health insurance, everything like was kind of tethered to that. But I assessed like finances and grants and things that were coming in. And so I don't know. That's the brief version of what happened. But it allowed me to be like a stay-at-home parent for a while too. And it allowed me more flexibility, and it allowed me to be a different type of mother than if I had like been working full time. But there's like it's a true balancing act, and I think all of the parents in the room just sort of know what that juggle is, and where you compromise, and where you feel like you fell short, and like where you think you have, where you have your wins. And I will say, I think it's been worth it. But ask me on a different day, I might have a different answer. I'm just kidding.
Thank you. I actually took one of your classes at PCC
Oh.
many moons ago. So it's nice to see you in this context, and I've been following your career from a distance for quite a long time, and I've really appreciated your growth over the years. I am so drawn to your use of material in all of its facets. So I'm wondering if you have ideas in this moment of what the materials might look like for a piece here in Williamstown.
It's such a good story, or it's such a good question, and I don't really know the answer. I don't know the answer to it. I mean, I think one thing that's been exciting to see in the site visit, and I think I knew this already, like having looked at a lot of the architectural, like the building plans, it's like the building is so, like its material selections are super rich. Like just today I visited the mock-up of the different materials that the team was choosing from. And I just like couldn't help but think of Brancusi, It's just like thinking of like marble and brass. I mean, this is not marble and brass and wood, but like the material story is like really beautiful. And I think like I also am interested in material stories. One thing that goes into selecting materials for an outdoor site, and a site that is located in a place that has 4 seasons, is that the material has to be freeze-thaw safe, and it has to kind of weather well in all these different conditions. And so those are the kind of questions that it makes something like bronze or some kind of more traditional metal like logical. I also realize there's other materials that I wouldn't necessarily lean on. Like I really do love natural materials, like materials that have a material story. I mean, one thing that's kind of cool about I-beams and steel, it's like it's the most recycled material on the planet. My I-beam supplier told me that I could, sorry, some people are laughing at that idea, but yes, my I-beam supplier told me that my ancestors' DNA, so like in our community, there's a lot of people who help, they're steel workers, and they work on building bridges and skyscrapers and have for a long time. And so we call our iron workers skywalkers. But my steel guy said, your ancestors could be in this beam that you're using right now because this material is recycled. Anyway, that was very exciting to me. So I think that the material, I stood like for a while, I was like, oh my gosh, the wood. And also I come from this place where like I feel like this notion of like glue laminating wood and being able to go up relatively high, like maybe 10 stories. I can't remember what the load factors are right now, but like that wood is so beautiful. I started thinking like, is that like a material? I mean, I think the thing that struck me today during the site visit is that I love the mountains, like the hills. The hills are so beautiful, and the roof line of the building is beautiful. And like really almost from day one, after talking with Dan, I was like, do you see how the building kind of looks like a turtle's back? Like it's so like for me, it like just spoke to me instantly. And I think that's always like a really funny thing, though. I think the thing that intimidates me most as an artist is some of the things that I love most, like they exist in nature. So how do you even like, it's just like, okay, well, I mean, I can't even believe that I'm trying to do what I do as an artist, because it kind of, it's just outside that window. But yeah, sorry, I didn't really answer the question, but I hope I gave you the things I am mulling around in my head.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I really appreciated it. And I appreciated the way that you talked about both this question of what does it mean to be companion species, and also your discussion of the ways that you engage the people of the communities of the different places that you work through sewing circles and other means. And I'm curious if you think about bioregionalism at all in your work, or if your work changes to engage the more than human communities of different places where you work.
I'm thinking that I do try to respond to bioregionalism, but I'm trying to think of if that's really ever changed the material, or if it is more sort of the like something in what formally happens. Yeah, I can think of this project that I did when I was invited to the Block Museum at Northwestern University, and I was reading a book by this guy named John Lau, who talked about the presence of the Potawatomi people in what is now Chicago. And he taught in his writing, he kind of talks about how the Native community that's there today is sort of this ephemeral monument to that history. And so I made this piece that's on this double long trade blanket, and in kind of my husband's a graphic designer, and so he found this font, which I couldn't tell you the name of right now, but he found this font and set it for me. And so it's this like kind of font that you would use for a monument, but then it's beaded and it says ephemeral monument over the top of the blanket. And I think one thing that's so interesting about Chicago and that area, this is like kind of mind-blowing. In the state of Illinois, there is not a single federally recognized tribe. There is water, like all this water. And I think the one thing that I like invite people to like think about is just like anywhere you have like a lot of water, like it's kind of like this super highway for Native people, right? Because it's like where you have like a lot of biodiversity. You have plants, you have thriving plants. It's a place where you could, like if you were prone to farming, you could do that, but you could also forage. It's where all of your animals, so it makes it are kind of gather near those places. And so like not to have like a single tribe tells you something about like the history of the United States and the history of relocation and reservations and the termination policies. I mean, there's so much we could talk about, but I do think like I really loved like that like thinking about what is it to be an ephemeral monument. So I don't know that really answered the question, but that's what the thought that was triggered. Yeah.
I love that you brought this up, Marie, because one thing about Chicago, it's one of the like largest centers of like indigenous populations.
Yeah.
Because you have like tribal peoples from all over the country, all over the world, indigenous people, all in this central area. But at the same time, like you're saying, like the absence with the Potawatomi have now been removed to like parts of Michigan and northern Wisconsin. So I just really really like that connection that you
Yeah.
made there, so thank you.
Thank you. Well, I can tell that people are like getting a little itchy. It's time to go and have a beverage, maybe if there's any cookies left. I really thank you all for your time this evening.